Okay, the first pattern we're going to tie today is it's a general attractor called the Moodah Poodah. Anyway, the background behind this one is basically I wanted something that was kind of a more generic imitation, but also could suspend a dropper. You guys hear okay? Okay. And so I went with a cleancomber hook and dress it up with some foam and hair on top, give it some legs, and anyway, it's really productive pattern. One of the things when it comes to when I say high country, I mean, you know, anything above, let's say 7,000 feet or whatever you want to say, but generally, you know, people are going to fish, say the Uintas or somewhere. The misconception is, and it's sometimes true, but the fish are generally stupid and they're not going to be too picky. So I have found, well, and they're also going to be smaller, let's say. But I found that not to be true. I found some of these really high mountain fish can be super picky, and so I tend to want to make patterns that are going to be not, you know, just be on like a woolly bugger or something that everybody fishes. So I want it to be dialed into time of year, type of imitation. So I'll actually show, if we have time, 3 patterns that I'm doing different things with to imitate. And so this first one is more of a general imitation, but if you look at this, what would you guys say it might imitate? Just a beetle? Absolutely. Around here, this side of the state, and to the east, cicadas. So it could pass as a cicada. So I think crickets, you know, is another option there. So, and then I fish this in different colors, or tie it in different colors, I should say. And yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So here's another one that I actually do really well with this color on the green. It's more of an olive, but it can also pass as a green drake. So it's a big, beefy, meaty pattern, but again, the nice thing is it hangs like that in the water, and the butt section is going to hang beneath the surface. And so it's even better to suspend a dropper from it, because then that orients it a little bit better and creates the top of this will be nice and even on the water, where the butt section is going to hang down in. So if you've ever seen the cleancomber style patterns, which are very effective patterns, I think that's the style. And this is the style I wanted to imitate, is that butt hanging down in the water. So if you go to our website, flyfishfood.com, you can search these up. It's the Moodah Poodah, M-O-O-D-A-H, P-O-O-D-A-H. And we also sell them on our website. But they're one of my favorite overall attractor patterns. If I'm going to new water, don't know exactly what's going on, or if the fish are really keen and on top, then I can throw one of these on. I can see it a mile away. I can float tungsten off of it because it floats fairly well, and you can mix up the colors. So on this one, I'm going to go with black. So we got a little bit of black thread, and the hook I'm going to put in here is a cleancomber. Now I got to put on my old man glasses. So I'll start this hook oriented a little off kilter, because I'm going to tie in my butt section of this first. And so I'll come down about 3/4 of the way down the shank and tie this back, and I'll tie in a ribbing and then some dubbing here. And so the ribbing is going to be some Flashabou, and you could use midge flash or crystal flash. It just needs to be this really fine stuff. You could use monofilament if you wanted to. Nothing super fancy about the ribbing. But again, with the hook oriented like this at the beginning, it makes it a little easier to tie things in. And then for the dubbing, I'm a huge fan of ice dub. You can tell here. And so this body is entirely iced up. There's 2 different colors, going to be black and then an orange hot spot. And so I'll dub in a little bit of a hot spot back here on the butt. You don't need much. And then I'm going to go back over that tie-in point just a titch and clean this up. Okay, now I'm going to go with some black. Another nice little trick here. iStub's got enough non-natural fibers in it that I tend to want to use a little bit of dubbing wax to get it to adhere. And then on this one, I'm going to build up, and I like to taper it better, so I'll add dubbing as I go. And then as you get higher, I can taper it up a little bit, and then I can start to think about orienting the hook again. And I want to get this right to where it starts to flatten out. And reorient or reset the hook there. So that's about as much as I want to dub, maybe a little bit more. It'll give the first swatch of hair a little bit of place to bite into. Now I'm kind of a wuss when it comes to wrapping things, so I don't like to lose track of them with my fingers, so I'll grab my handy aqua pliers here. And then this is just if I can get my thing to start wrapping here. All the way up the body. When you use these flash type materials, a good pair of sharp scissors comes in handy. All right, so straighten that out a little bit. So now I've got the body done, and I'm going to work on the thorax area. So that's going to consist of pretty much, like you can see here, the hair. This is an elk dyed black, and then the bulk of this is just the 2mm crosslink foam. So at the end of the day, this is really a very simple pattern. So I'm going to grab my hair here, and this is just dyed cow elk.
Dave Gibson, come to the Adventure Theater, please.
So as far as the amount goes, I don't want to add too much. One of the things with the foam fly like this, and a lot of foam flies in general, is that you can tend to make them top heavy if you put too much foam or anything above where the center of gravity of the hook's going to be. So, something like that, a little third of a pencil size clump. And normally I have my handy brush, dubbing fur brush, but you just come in here, and if you roll the fibers between your fingers, then you can come in and just pick out that under fur. And you just do that a couple times. That works out pretty good. Then I'm just going to grab my hair stacker and just make sure I got them in there. Tap them down to even them out. And then I'm going to lay these on the shank so that the tips extend just to the bend of the hook there. Maybe a little further. And then one wrap light, and then start to cinch it down. And then one little trick, again, these flies where you've got a lot of foam or other materials on top of the shank have a tendency to turn if you don't tie them in well. So rather than just make do with one tie-in spot, I'll come up here with another wrap, pull back some more fibers, another wrap, pull up all the fibers, and then the wraps that I'm doing in front here will end up locking in so that there's limited movement. And then I simply come up here, grab the bulk of these, and snip them off. So it's just like that. Okay, now I'm going to grab some foam. And this is just some 2mm cross link. You could use craft foam. You don't want anything thicker than 2mm, because again, it's going to have a tendency to spin on you because of the fact that you've got a lot of materials in a small area. So what I do is, to gauge the width here, is I kind of take where I'm flat on my shank going this way. I'm going to come in here and go just about the length as it is from that tip to the hook shank. And then we'll just, and I usually do these in advance, so I've got them all pre-measured. And I tend to cut these a little longer than you need, because they're a little easier to work with. But at the end of the day, as you can kind of see by the finished one here, I have to have some and then fold it back. So I end up cutting, so I don't have to be super technical about the length when I tie this in. The biggest thing is that you want to make the fold, and then I want to have a hole to put the eye through, or the eye of the hook through. So I just come in here and I grab a bodkin at that fold point, and I'm just going to pierce it with the bodkin. And then you kind of work that down. And then I'm going to do a sizing. And the way I do the sizing is I'll just pull that on there. And again, I'm cutting them bigger just so you can see. And so the size is right. It doesn't look too thick or too thin. Both the width of the fly, if you're looking at it head on. So then what I'll want to do is, again, because this is it would have a tendency to spin on me, I'm going to treat it with some super glue in this area. And I also want to make sure that, and that's one of the reasons why we clip off the hair right there, because that can take on some glue. And then everything else after I glue this and tie it in is already with the foam in place. So I grab a little bit of fly tire cement. If you don't have this, this is probably your best fly tying super glue. It was made with the Zap company in conjunction with Wapsi. It used to be kind of hard to get, but now they make it a lot more. So this is a great glue. It's brush on, and so I won't take too big a whiff. But I'm going to come in here, and then the other thing to be careful is, and I've learned this by experience, if you set a dollop of super glue and your thread's hanging down, that can sometimes go all the way down through to your spool. And once you got super glue down in your spool, you're out $2. So I'm going to take that off to get it out of the way. And now I've got a little too much on. Come back in here, and top and bottom, just apply a coating of super glue. Okay? That's going to give us a little bit more support for the foam so it doesn't twist. And then I usually come in at a side angle and fold that, and then you want to make sure your thread is actually right where you want to tie this in. And then I still keep it kind of on the side, and then I'm going to come over with one not tight, super tight wrap. Now I twist it, and I start to tighten that. And as I've done that, now I can actually feel the super glue starting to hold. I'll come in here and trim the bottom and the top. And on the bottom one, I want to trim it about as flush as I can get it. And if there's some overlap, I'll come in here and trim that too. Like that. Okay, and then the top, same kind of thing. I want to measure out about 3/4 of the way up the hair, if you can kind of see that. And I'm going to cut this into a V just because it looks cool, and the fish, they think the V's look cool too. So I'll come up there, cut that a little bit more, and now I'll just come in here and make the V. That actually does a couple things. It also helps to ferret out some of the weight. So there I am on the shape there. And then I really am only left to tie on the legs and the indicator. So for the legs, I've got some barred orange and black centipede legs from Montana Fly. So the way I do legs, I tie one piece in, grab it with the wrap, pull that around, tie the other piece in, and allowing for the torque of the thread, pull that in there, one more somewhat loose wrap, and then you can adjust the legs to your liking, like that. Now I can come in here and give them a trim. Want them to be about the body length if you go from the back, and then I'll make the front legs the same size. So that they create a nice little X there. Okay, and then I'm going to grab some parapost wing material. That's one thing to pay attention to when you're using these synthetic type of poly materials. Parapost wing is treated with watershed. So this is one you could use all day long for wings or posts, things that are meant to float. Whereas just your Antron or anything like that, same type of material, being a synthetic, but they're not treated, so they inherently don't float. Anyway, I use this polypost or parapost a lot. And for this one, just one thickness of it.
Is there a preference on color?
You know, I like to kind of match it. So if I'm doing an orange and black kind of cicadas-ish, I'll use the orange. I also like to have, like if I'm using my olives and the tans, which could also pass as hoppers, sometimes I find I can see better the white post. Sometimes I can see a fluorescent post. So I'll have them in different, and this is just for me to see, really, more than anything. So I'll come up here, and then just for my own edification, I try to leave a little bit more on. Well, I don't need that much. I just like to have enough that I can trim off. And then I can come in here and I trim this to length, just about extending beyond that foam, and then I cut this one flush, like so. Okay, now I'm going to come in and whip finish. If you haven't tried these Tiemco whip finishers, they're small, but I love them. The angle of them is super nice, and this one actually has a half-hitch tool on the end. I don't need to load up on whip finish turns because I'm going to glue this again. So I'll just come in here and give that a good trim. And now I'm going to flip it upside down because that's where I ended my my thread. I'm going to give this a tiny, tiny dab of super glue. Right at that point. Whew, stuff smells good. Okay. So there it is, the Moodah Poodah. Probably shorted the wing a little too much on that one, but yeah, definitely. So again, it's a great attractor pattern. It's you can fish it for crickets, beetles, cicadas, you name it. And this is the one I kind of like if we fish a lot of cicada water. And I've got some other patterns here. Anyway. Oh yeah, here we go. This is the Project Cicada. So it's a much bigger, beefier imitation. But I find if I'm fishing and the fish are not hitting the bigger stuff, I'll go with the smaller guy, and they'll whatever they're hitting it for, it still works. So I kind of would vary between the two depending on what they're focusing on. So anyway, again, the tutorial's on the website, and we also have them in the shop, that sort of thing. So any questions on that fine looking fly?
So you could just beef up if you just wanted to use the same pattern.
Absolutely, yeah. So in fact, it's kind of a funny thing. I was fishing the green a couple of years ago during a Baetis hatch. and I was fishing the section that had a lot of fish heavily feeding, really clear, slow moving water, and I was throwing tons of really super techy Baetis emergers and that, and I was getting the snub, 90% of the time. I took one of these Moodah Poodahs in an olive, probably a size 14, maybe 12, probably 14, and started to pick up fish on that. So I don't know what they were taking it for, but that's one of those crazy things. So that's kind of one of my standbys. If I'm not getting stuff hitting, I'll throw that on. Again, I think it's that orientation of something floating up and then there's something struggling in the surface film. But I don't know. My brain isn't that much bigger than a fish's brain.
Blacks, olives, tans.
Blacks, olive, tans, and then I also fish purples. So yeah, I just mix it up. If you're fishing yellow sallies, yellow will work. So that's kind of my thing. Is I have a box that has more of these in it. That's just every color combination. So drakes, boom, olive. Yellow sallies, yellow. And then hoppers too. Okay, so that is the extent of my dry fly demonstrations for right now. We're doing okay on time. So here is a box that I'm working on right now. This is my Calabaetis / midge. These guys are hitchhiking, they shouldn't be here. But so these Calabaetis nymphs here, I fish a lot of still waters, and I like when I go to fish a lake in the mountains, I'm always looking for what they're eating. I'm not really throw on a woolly bugger or a leech and just strip it through the water and figure it out. So I'm looking, are there Calabaetis, are there damsels, scuds, anything that I can find to imitate what they're actually eating. My success rate goes through the roof. So a lot of years I've messed around with Calabaetis and realized that I was using patterns that were quite a bit too big for the sizes that I was really seeing in the water. So at the end of the day, I started working on the last 3 years a good Calabaetis nymph pattern to fish either weighted with a bead, which I'll tie here, or unweighted, and just kind of subtle presentation, slow stripping, just more of a technical finesse approach rather than big woolly bugger strip. So I'll find out where they're feeding. I try to dial in the depth, and then again, depending on whether I need weight on the fly, I'll put weight. But so anyway, this is a super simple Calabaetis imitation, and it has great movement in the water. And so anyway, I'm going to start off with a size 14. This is a 2X long nymph hook. This is a fulling mill. Black nickel, it's barbless. Nothing magic about the hook, any 2X long type nymph hook will work. I tie these mostly in 14s and 16s. Calabaetis are a longer bodied bug as a nymph. They are a swimmer, so like a Baetis or a blue-winged olive, they're a swimmer. So they'll actually have more of a stubby head. And so the only reason I say that is because I've got these Flyman nymph heads, and they come in clinger and crawler design, and then swimmer and burrower design. So 2 overall shapes, and I'll show you. Actually, I'll dig one out so you can kind of see. So here's the completed one. You can see the head there. It's got a couple of eyes on there. These are tungsten. They're pre-shaped like that. They're a bit more expensive than a tungsten bead. Does it make a difference? Probably not. But it is kind of fun to go super geeky, techy with some of your patterns. But so what I'll end up doing is I'll tie these in 2 different styles. This is the weighted style with the tungsten head. And then I'll do another style that's just a soft hackle. The same exact dressing, just no bead. And then the soft hackle at the front with the head on it. So very simple patterns. You can tie these, all day long. They're very, very simple to tie. So anyway, I'm going to grab a swimmer and burrower head. And we're gonna go small. And then just like a regular tungsten bead, you just feed in the small hole. Okay, so we've got the bead in there. Thread-wise, I'm just gonna use some tan UTC 70. And then just dressing the whole hook here. Okay, so I love pheasant tails. I love pheasant tails, but I also love partridge more. So whenever I can, I try to incorporate some soft hackle aspect to a lot of my nymph or stillwater patterns. So it's hard to beat the versatility of partridge. Second place would probably be like a whiting 4B hen cape. They can get smaller and they come in some really nice colors. Brahma is also a very good soft hackle for this type of application. But I yelled pretty loud on that one. Partridges reign supreme. So I'll end up grabbing 2 feathers. One is going to be for the tailing material. I thought I grabbed 2. No worries. And then the other is going to be for the legs. So I'm going to come in here and Calibaetis nymph tails are about body length. Well, less than body length. And so I'm going to tie in the tail there. So about that long. Okay, and then this one also happens to have a crystal flash or flashaboo ribbing. Okay, so we got that tied in there. And then for the body, or the abdomen itself, I'm going to use some fine natural dubbing from Nature Spirit. And they've got a Calabatis color that's just a perfect color, especially when this is wet. It matches really, really closely to most of the naturals. If I'm in, there are some lakes that I fish that the Calabatis the nymphs at least tend to be a little more gray than the tan. Also understand that Calabatis, when they emerge and they go to adults, they end up looking grayer anyway. So your nymphs and your adults are not necessarily going to be the same colors. And anyway, just an interesting tidbit. I'll grab up a little bit of swax, which is especially helpful with this fine natural dubbing. It's very fine. But with a little tiny bit of wax, you can dub up a nice tight body. And then just build that body up. And I'm more of a fan of start with less and build up, because it's a lot harder to take dubbing off than to add it. So the way I'll usually fish these is on a midge tip line, or you could even do on a floating line. And with a midge tip line, I don't know if has anybody ever used a midge tip line before on still water? So it's kind of a cross between a floating line and like a clear camo or a glass like airflow, or what do they call them? Yeah, just your clear camo style intermediate lines. But this one has a tip, so it's floating, and then it has a tip that's going to have a certain sink rate, just like any other line would. But it's a braided core line on that tip, and the sensitivity that you get on those is phenomenal. I mean, we'll be out casting, getting it down a little. I mean, it's only going down, depending on the flies I'm using, maybe at the most 4 feet, but you can feel literally every little hit or titch on that line. And so because of that braided cord, there's no give in the line itself. And it's super fun to fish with, because compared to like a regular floating line or even a sinking line, you can feel every little thing, and the hits, you're into the fish a lot more consistently, I feel. So anyway, just a side note on midge tip lines and how to fish these. I'm gonna come up here. Rib the body. I'm going to leave myself a little bit of room for the thorax. So the thorax is going to consist of a hot spot orange eye stub, surprise, surprise, some legs, and then some peacock eye stub. So, excuse me. So I'm going to start off with my orange in the hot spot. And then what I'll do here is grab my feather took off. Here we go. Okay, and here's a little trick on how to make a soft tackle without wrapping it like a soft tackle. So, I mean, it's the same material. So I'm going to take a partridge feather. I want to gauge the leg length by about my body length, so I kind of hold that up there, and that looks about right. Now with some ultra sharp scissors, and I'll snip out the very tip of that. Actually a little more. So I've created a V for my feather, and then what I'll do is I'll come from the top, and notice the feather has a natural bow in it. I'm going to put that tip, and I can kind of hold it on there with my thumb, and then with my other hand I pinch those fibers. Now I'll do 2 somewhat loose wraps, and I just let my thread hang. So you can kind of see that it's all ski-wampus, but now what you can do, because I just didn't tighten that much, is I can kind of tweak and torque the feather, and even if I need to, actually did okay on this one, but you can pull that out. So it's better to tie it in long and then pull the fibers out and away, so that you're left with a nice little, what do you call it, symmetrical set of legs. So the nice thing about doing it that way is you can prep a lot of these in advance, split them, cut them, and get them ready, and then you just slap it up there, a couple of loose wraps, yank it down, tie it on, adjust it, and you're good to go. So I'll come back in here and give this a couple of securing wraps and trim that off. And now I'm going to come back with some peacock, or you can use pheasant tail, that's the color of the dubbing. And again, I use a little bit of dubbing wax. Start off with just enough. And then because I'm behind this bead, and I'll show you what I do here, but you really need to jam a bunch of dubbing back in there. And you'll notice the bead there is still a little bit ski-wampus. But as I get a few more wraps, the dubbing back in behind that, it's going to start to lock in place. And then you can start to really crank. And then I whip finish. Now the other thing I do, once I whip finish, you take your thumbnail and just kind of push it in there. In this case, I'm going to give it another whip finish, because sometimes that whip finish wrap sits up on the bead and you're actually not whip finishing. So I'm going to give it another one to be safe. And then I just make sure that it sits right behind the bead as far down as it can. Trim both of those off. There we go. So again, if I were, we're about out of time. If I were fishing this just shallower, I'll go with something like this. It's more of a soft tackle. I used some biot on the body on this one, but same kind of a deal. A lot of times I'll actually use this as the point fly, and then I'll trail one of these 3-4 feet up, and then maybe even another trailer, depending on what they're doing. The nice thing is you can kind of progress that through the hatch, and you can start searching with one, a heavier nymph like this as the hatch starts to get going in the mornings. And then usually by the end of the day, I don't even have to use a bead. I'm fishing 2 or 3 of these soft hackles, and the hits are vicious. Because these are swimmers, again, the fish are used to them swimming and trying to get away, so they really key on that movement. And especially again with a midge tip or another line like that that's super sensitive, I just makes it a whole lot more fun, I think. But anyway, we will again, this one may not be on the website yet. There is a tutorial done for it, but so it's probably a couple weeks away. But we've got some other similar kind of Calabaetis patterns on there as well. Lots of Calabaetis around here. Strawberry has an insane Calabaetis hatch. Actually, every stillwater that I know of around here has awesome Calabaetis. Really overlooked, I think, by a lot of anglers because probably they're small. It's not what I mean. Nothing against woolly buggers, but figuring out what they're eating and kind of going that more techie route. That's just kind of my nerd brain working a little bit more. I just enjoy these types of patterns a lot more anyway.